Hello, I'm Matt Shaw, author of American Modern, Architecture, Community, Columbus, Indiana, and you're listening to U.S. Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. I'm Tom Guild. For decades, we've been reading about Lindal Cedar Homes in design magazines. Now, under the leadership of third-generation President Christina Lindal, they've branched out into compelling designs inspired by Frank Lloyd Wright. And inside great houses like this, you're probably going to need good decorating advice. So we'll also go to Montauk, New York in the Hamptons to talk with author and award-winning interior designer Lauren Rottet. Wrapping up, we'll chat with our musical guests, Marco Palos and American Idol's Blake Lewis of Phat Cat Swinger. And now here's your host, a former swing dancer, Mr. Modernism, George Smart.
Thanks, Tom. Who would have thought that the smooth moves of swing dancing and the clean, functional lines of modernist architecture share a common bond? Yet these two disparate art forms exhibit a surprising synergy because both swing dancing and modernist architecture are defined by a certain rhythm. In swing, dancers move in sync with the music, their bodies swaying and dipping, but there's a structure around which the moves are based. Similarly, modernist buildings are structured around a rhythmic interplay of windows, horizontal and vertical elements, and scale depending on what a room is for. In the same way, swing dancers prioritize steps designed to be efficient and effective, allowing dancers to move across the dance floor effortlessly. Both dancing and architecture celebrate simplicity. People are not afraid to experiment and push the boundaries of their respective fields. Swing dancers are constantly developing new variations on the classics, while architects explore innovative materials, construction techniques, and spatial concepts. If all that is too technical for you, just remember, if you can walk in a circle and count to 8, you can learn to swing dance.
Okay.
It's one of the few activities where a new, beautiful person falls into your arms every 4 minutes. You might even marry one of them. I did. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by June Goldfinger and Jeff Taylor, sponsors of Circle, Square, Triangle, a traveling exhibition on the architecture of Myron Goldfinger, and by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs.
Seattle-based Lindal Cedar Homes has been around for decades. The largest manufacturer of custom post and beam home packages, Lindal plants 25 trees for every home sold through their partnership with the American Forest Global Relief Program. Today's guest, Christina Lindal, is the third-generation Lindal to serve as president of the company. Christina has a degree in molecular biology from Scripps College.
Go Athenas!
And in 2023, she was appointed to the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation Board. She's one of the few women presidents of a major construction company. Lindal and the foundation are working with today's other guest, Aris George. Aris is originally from Greece, and he's the founder of OM Studio. He also taught architecture and studio design at Taliesin for decades. Aris is now creating houses in the style of Frank Lloyd Wright for Lindal, which is how they got on our radar. Welcome to the podcast, Christina and Aris.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, thank you. Excited to be here.
So before we get started, Christina, you have taken up a very specific sport. Can you tell us how you and your dog Boomer became interested in agility training?
Oh, geez. Yes. Well, now over 10 years ago, when I adopted this gorgeous Australian Shepherd, he was running laps around me and just full of energy. And
he was herding you.
Yes, exactly. And I actually did take him to a herding farm, and it was not really something I really enjoyed being around the farm. He would be absolutely filthy every single time we went, and just decided, there must be something else out there. And we found agility, and I found a great teacher, and he just took to it like any Australian Shepherd would. And I realized that I needed to do it with him, because at the end of the training, they would put all these treats out for the dogs, and they go choose a toy. And he, instead of going and doing that, he would go run the course again by himself. So at that point I said, yep, this is for him. And I did that for about 10 years. He's a little older now, can't quite run as fast, but
so what is it? What is the agility training that you were doing with him? What is
it's kind of like an obstacle course.
Exactly. Yes. There's ramps and tunnels and jumps, and you have to run around with them and show them where to go. And it's just how fast you can do it. He just loved figuring it all out. He's always thinking.
Is there a dog Olympics for this sport?
There are competitions, some big ones. I don't think it's in the Olympics yet, but maybe you'll see it in the future.
Now, how did Lindal Cedar Homes start with your grandfather, Christina?
He started, it'll be 80 years ago next year. He started it just after he came out of the war, and he saw the need for housing, and he traveled around during the war seeing all these prefabricated homes popping up in just a few weeks for housing the soldiers. And he took those plus other things that he learned through his life from working in a lumber yard. He was an inventor, always up to his very, very, very last day. He was thinking about how to do things better. He invented everything from a card game to the beautiful system that we work with today still, the system that Aris fell in love with as well. That's where kind of it all started. He wanted to be able to bring a custom kit to anybody's site, anybody in the world, anywhere in the world, and give them a beautiful designed home.
I remember growing up, I would see these houses in a lot of magazines. Like Popular Mechanics was the one that I read because I was a nerd and that's what I did. And these homes were head and shoulders above all the other prefab homes that were advertised. They were just gorgeous, weren't they?
Yes, that was another kind of little bit of a secret of his. He knew where the best quality wood came from, and that was the Pacific Northwest, where we still operate from in Seattle, Washington. And all of our wood comes from the beautiful British Columbia coastline. It is the best wood in the world. You cannot get Western red cedar or any type of cedar of that quality or that type of wood anywhere else in the world. And the fir, pine, spruce, all of those materials, just the best you can get.
It's resistant to termites and other
Yes, cedar is very resistant to rot and as well as bugs.
Yeah, must smell great in the house.
Yeah.
Yes, we don't use cedar nearly as much as we used to. A lot of people opt for the more of the drywall and just kind of cedar accents and things like that. And we've actually done homes now that don't have even a little bit of cedar in them. So it's really up to the client's taste, and if they want that much wood or they want it more as more of a beautiful accent.
Now, Aris, in your years of architecture in Greece, did you ever meet the noted modernist architect Takis Zenidos or go to any of his buildings?
Zenetos.
Yeah, Zenetos.
Yes, absolutely. He is one of the heroes of modernism in Greece, of course. There are others, but he was particularly interesting because he used complex geometries. And if you've been to Greece, mostly it's rectangular boxes, primarily because it's an architectural chaos over there. But his designs definitely stood out because he had geometries that were unlike anyone else. There's a school he did that is this beautiful polygonal fan elevated off the ground with huge pointed cantilevers that once you see it among all the boxes, it really captures your imagination. Yeah.
It really is impressive. I found his work about 15 years ago and just couldn't believe it and was so sad to learn that he died quite young.
Yeah, it's a stressful profession.
Well, I'm glad you're still with us.
Yes.
Now, Christina, I know you get this question all the time. What's a Lindal home like? What is the vibe that your company is trying to do in putting these together?
Yes, it is. It's something that's definitely evolved over the years, but we really do focus on good design and a home that when somebody's in it, they feel comfortable in the home, they want to be there, and it enhances their lives. It makes everything that they do from spending time with their family to spending time on their own, as enjoyable as we can possibly make it. And connecting them with nature is a big part of that. We do that with the post and beam system. That's why from day one, we've always used a post and beam system that allows us those big open spans that you see in our designs. Very easily, even in high snow load areas, you can still have these big open walls of glass that connect you with nature.
Now, these are not prefab homes. They're custom built. How do you collaborate with the purchaser, the owner?
Yes, we do sometimes get lumped into a prefab group as well, because there are some aspects that we use of the prefab systems, including designing on a grid. And we do pre-manufacture parts of the package. However, a majority of the home is site built, and it is built for the site that the customer is building on too, because every site is so unique. We're not building on giant swaths of flat land that you see a lot of bigger developments go on. To your question on how we collaborate with the clients, maybe Ari actually wants to take this one. He's the one that really is working with the clients up front.
So our design process is a little different than the traditional architect-owner-client relationship. The design process in our case is configured to modify the kit to the client desires and wishes and to the site conditions. I teach the clients how to see the kit visually with the tool. They understand how to make changes, how to request the changes. It's basically learning to color between the lines. And I'm also demonstrating that even though we do have these guardrails, they're not limitations to how beautiful the result might be. It's all up to them, their budget, their taste. And all of that definitely develops for the sole purpose of getting a specific price once the design is stable enough. And if the price is right, then they can continue on to the purchase. And then from that point on, unless they make changes, which can be made, everything is rather predictable. The cost, the timelines, something that I know in the profession at large is a challenge. We'll always hear architects going over time, over budget. There are many, many different reasons for that. And the clients are not 100% innocent in that scenario, but the way we do it somehow works. I've done over 150 designs so far, and I would say maybe I can count a handful that things kind of got stuck. But for the most part, it's a very smooth process. I have this unpopular theory that if you're designing your dream home, it should be a 100% positive experience.
Well, someone should give you the Pritzker, because that's just radical thought right there.
That's too much. Yes. Thank you.
Christina, one thing I notice about those ads from way back, and I don't know if you still do this, is I think that the Lindal houses were one of the first to kind of be lit up from the inside. That was one of the ways they popped out of the page on the ad. Do you still do that?
Yes, we were shockingly probably one of the very first people when we photographed homes. We didn't go the typical real estate ad direction where you kind of get more fisheye lenses and things like that. We employed more of what we call an architectural style of photography when it comes to our homes. And it was pretty revolutionary, I think, at the time. I really give a lot of credit to my aunt, who was one of the first people behind putting out the beautiful plan books. And we have now a half dozen of those hardback coffee style books that are out there. So many people fell in love with over as they grew up, because they're sitting there on their mom and dad's counter, or mom and dad's coffee tables. And yes, the lighting of the inside was something we started to do long time ago. And now we can do it digitally. So
how did this partnership come about with the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation? Did it start first with you're joining their board, or did you have the idea first? I mean, how did this series of homes come about?
It was, I want to say, over 10 years of step-by-step process. It was a long process. And it didn't start out with saying, we want to do Usonian homes. That was not where it actually even started. That came much later. Joining the board is actually a more recent thing that came out of it, and it was great next step in continuing that partnership. But it started back when we were doing what we call the Lindal Architects Collaborative. We had just come out with this new, I would say it's not really a new system, just a bit of adjustment on the system that we were using, the grid system. We employed a vertical aspect to it as well, or I should say a horizontal aspect to the vertical, and just kind of made a few other little tweaks. And we come out with some designs with this system, and they were very popular, but they're all kind of starting to look the same. So our CEO at the time, Michael Aris, he said, why don't we go out and ask architects if they would take this system and see what they could do with it? We gave them the parameters, you can make little tweaks to it here or there, but wanted to keep them in the system as much as possible. And we had incredible response. We had in the end, 8 different firms that we worked with, and some big names, Bates Massey, Carney Logan Burke, Cutler,
Marmol.
And Marmol Rasner. Thank you, Ari. That Zero Energy Design, Dowling, the big names, especially in those local markets. The first group that we actually worked with, who we had kind of had some relationship, was the students and professors at the Frank Lloyd Wright School of Architecture. We had worked on a smaller ADU called the Mod Fab with them, and our design manager and CEO went down there and taught them the system. That was when Ari first found out about it. And from there, it just kept going. We fell in love with Ari at that point because he was doing some of the most beautiful designs, taking our system and doing just wonderful things with it, and creating renderings at the time when renderings were still kind of new in the industry. There's a little bit of work on that, but Ari was really taking them to a whole new level, and he really helped bring that program together and make it really sing. He kept doing that for us. And then at some point we said, hey, Ari, would you like to do some of your own designs and have your own part? And that's where the Lindal Designer Series came from. And that kept growing. And my sister, Trina Lindal, she really then took the next step, which was she decided she wanted to go back to school and get her degree in architecture. And so she went to the Frank Lloyd Wright School of Architecture, of course. Where else would you go? And
do they have a football team there, Ari? We always like to root for the home
team. We did
team.
have a rock band.
What's the name of the rock band?
The Whirling Arrows.
The Whirling Arrows. Okay.
Ooh.
And for her thesis, she took some of the Usonian designs and applied our grid system to them, and also a modern take. So the kitchen's usable, the bedroom's a little bit bigger, more closet space, bigger bathrooms, making those Usonians the next level. And Ari, of course, helped with that. And now Ari has taken that project over and made it what it is today. And Ari, please feel free to add anything to that.
The funny thing is that when I was doing those renderings, I was definitely encouraged, to put it mildly, to turn on the lights inside. It was funny that idea kept going through even in the digital realm, that you should not have a house from the outside look just dark through the windows, especially when there's so much glass. Sometimes it's unusual to see inside a home during the day, but that's why you'd see a lot of the photography and quite a bit of the renderings are in those transition periods of the day, dusk or early morning, so that you can see both daylight, but also see why the need of the lights on is there. Because it could give the wrong impression. If lights are on during the day, it means the house is dark.
Right. Now, did your sister, Christina, go through the tradition at Taliesin of building her own little structure to live in, or have they stopped doing that altogether?
They've stopped doing that, but she did work on a couple of different ones, either working on restoring a couple of different ones. She also did work on one of the new ones they built that year called the Cube. The funny story with that was she's coming from the background that she has come from, a construction world. She was the only one there that knew how to swing a hammer. So she turned into the basically impromptu GC on the project.
Oh, awesome.
If she wasn't there, I'm not sure that shelter would have ever been built.
I'm glad somebody knew how to do that.
Now, Ari, when a lot of people think of Frank Lloyd Wright houses, they, of course, love them and love to visit them. But the reputation of the original ones was that they leaked, they had lots of structural problems, they were hard to maintain. How has the technology caught up so that the houses that you're designing are more durable?
Yes, two different answers in this. Going back to the Frank Lloyd Wright part, there is always lore and myth around Wright. If any leak, they didn't leak any more than a typical home would leak that was poorly built. And one of the issues with Wright's designs, especially at the time, the huge pro was that there was craftsmanship available at no extra cost to create beautifully crafted homes, something that we cannot really do anymore. Today, we assemble warranties, basically. Every product comes with its warranty, and then we put it together, we stitch it. The con at the time was that he had ideas that were never tried before. And having a flat roof meet a clear story window with no room for flashing, for example, just wanted to see the pure geometry of that line meeting the glass. And in those cases, if the contractor did not pay much attention or did not discuss it with him, then there would be failure eventually. The other thing is that structurally, he liked the idea of what he called the organic, which was instead of having only a certain part of the building carry the load, he wanted everything to be structural. So even the sash of a window could hide a piece of steel to make it strong enough to be structural. And so there was a lot of movement in those homes because of that. And even though he tried to use masonry masses to stabilize the lateral movement, sideways. That's why you see the kitchen usually is next to the fireplace and it's built out of hard material like stone if there was budget, or cinder block if it was lower budget. And that was the core. And then around it, he would build a light structure. And primarily because his idea was economy. The first he did in Madison, Wisconsin, the first Usonian called the Jacob Swan, even had reject bricks from the Johnson Wax building project that was happening in Racine. So you'll find curved bricks in the core of the Jacobs house.
Wow.
So the recycling of materials the client challenged him with a $5,000 budget in 1936, of course, and he did it. Now, if you fast forward to today, first of all, we could not build a Frank Lloyd Wright design, even if it were to be for a show. If you had to walk in it, it had to meet code, and nothing about those old homes meet contemporary code in terms of dimension. Yes. So when we are working on these designs, we're not trying to recreate the Frank Lloyd Wright designs. We're taking the basic ideas and geometries and transposing them as if in music. When you take one key and you use another key for the same melody, it sounds a little different. He actually thought of that himself because he loved Bach, and he was very musical in his understanding of geometry. So we take the grids. Thankfully, he had a grid. So the grid is almost like the pentagram. So we can transpose note for note if we'd like, but then add the normal height. So a lot of our clients these days want to have accessibility. So we have to make sure that the widths are there for future assisted movement in the house, aging in place. Most of our clients build them for them to last their lifetime, which is a privilege, right? Because most people build homes now and then they sell them in a year and go somewhere else.
I know in the old Wright houses, you'd have those hallways that were as narrow, in some cases, as 20 or 24 inches. I mean, they were just tiny.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you could barely get furniture into the rooms because of the hallways being so small.
Yes. But here, there are two more things in those hallways that we can take away. One was they were lined with closets. Mm-hmm. So there was a storage room, basically, a long, albeit narrow. And then on top of the storage, at some point, you'd add a band of windows so that there would be light in that hallway. And they could be 40 feet long, but it was pleasant to walk through. Now, if you take that into contemporary dimensions, you have solved that issue because we still use clear stories. It's one of my favorite windows to use at the Lindal system. I call it the workhorse. It does so much, provides privacy because it starts at 7 feet and goes up to almost 10. You can see treetops and clouds from inside while you're still having privacy. And those are all amazing ideas that I don't think expired with him. And one of the main motivations for us was there's new generations of clients that may not know very well what those ideas were in detail. Maybe they know the mythology and, some of the scandals, and they know he was important. But we drill deep to say, look, the fact that you have an open plan in today's lofts or studio apartments really started with him.
That's
He
right.
took down the walls between rooms back at the turn of the previous century. So in a way, it's working with the ideas and making sure that they're built with contemporary standards.
Now, Christina, one of the problems with any company like yours that makes things prefab or kits or puts things together for people in advance, how do you get the builders to know what they're doing when they get your materials and do it right?
Yes, it comes down to the plans a lot of the time. We have some of the most detailed plans that come out with our kits. Every single part is labeled with a number, and on that part is that same number on the plans where it goes. So it really, really helps the builder know exactly where each thing goes. We split it all out by floor, walls, roof. So we do try to make it as simple as possible for a builder with at least some post and beam experience to be able to put up fairly simply and quickly.
Yeah, I think I've seen some of your instruction manuals, and they are quite good. It kind of reminded me of like if you ever put together one of those complicated Lego kits that has 1,000 pieces, you can flip through
5,000 pieces.
Yeah, and you can see exactly how these things are supposed to go together. It's really fascinating.
Yes, well, I love those kits. Those are fun.
Those are fun. How does your company design things when there are so many variations in local regulations and so forth and zoning? How do you anticipate some of that or try to standardize around that?
That's a continuing challenge for us. Absolutely. There's so many new codes and local challenges, HOA challenges, all of those things. They're always keeping us on our feet. Absolutely. Every year there's something new that comes out that we have to adjust our kits for, or at least for our specific kit. And that's just kind of comes down to the fact that it is still a custom home. We are still able to make those adjustments as we need for those local environments. When we're building in areas where there's 200 plus pounds per square foot of snow on that roof, yes, we have to make some fairly significant changes to the structure, but we can still do it. It's just the flexibility of the system to be able to accommodate that. We haven't come up against something that we have not been able to figure out how to design around.
Are most of your clients in the U.S. or are they international?
A majority of ours are definitely in the U.S., but we also have a very significant number of clients in Canada as well. And then we do have varying amounts of international work. As over the years, back in the 60s is probably one of the first times that we really started going international, and that was to Japan. If you might know, in Japan, they really love high quality, high customer service products, and that was a niche we filled very easily for them. We've done thousands and thousands of homes all over Japan and still do. We've had other international, basically have a homes on every continent.
Even Antarctica?
From not
almost every
continent.
That's impressive.
Almost. Are there Lindal Cedar commercial buildings? Like, have you done a school or a hospital or something other than a house?
I don't know about a hospital, but we have done a dentist, a couple of them, one in particular that we did in Japan, actually. We've done hotels. We did a huge one in Vladivostok many years ago, back when we were doing also a lot of work in Russia. Not anymore.
Yep.
I went away with the Crimea crisis. We've also done a lot of hotels, churches, done a few churches.
Really?
Yes, and we've done a lot of lodges as well. Yeah.
The website is lindal.com. Thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We were talking with Christina Lindal and Aris George. Our next guest is Lauren Rottet, founder and principal of Rottet Design. Initially a med student, Lauren Rottet became an architectural powerhouse with an impressive portfolio of clients, including Disney, the Four Seasons, Marriott, Goldman Sachs, and the New York Stock Exchange. Her work garnered global acclaim, including awards from the AIA, IIDA, and Interior Design. She's the author of Authentic Design, showcasing her projects over the past 15 years, including the interiors of houses, apartments, hotels, and offices. Here's George's conversation with Lauren, taped in front of an audience inside her George Nelson-designed Montauk, New York house during the Hamptons 20th Century Modern Tour last summer.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you all so much for coming. This is my first time in the Hamptons. I just flew in here yesterday and experienced Hamptons traffic, which I heard about for a long time. So I'm getting the hang of it like a native. This is the Hamptons 20th Century Modern Tour, and my name is George Smart. I am the head of usmodernist.org and US Modernist Radio, which is a podcast that has been on about 10 years, about 380 shows about modern architecture specifically. And this is being recorded right now, so you'll be able to hear this in a couple of months. So you can tune in on that on your favorite podcast platform. I can't think of a better start to visiting this area than being in this house with Lauren. Let's give her a big hand. This is a fabulous place, isn't it? As I'll share with you in a minute, this is a person with incredible design skills. So I want to start out by sharing my design skills, which are none. When my wife and I got a new house, I was in an airport and I was flying somewhere, and she called me and she said, "We have to make the bathroom decisions right away, like tomorrow." And I said, "Well, I'm not going to be home by tomorrow, but I'll figure out something." And so I looked where I was around me, and I pulled out my camera and I took some photos and I sent them to her. And that's why my bathroom looks like the American Airlines Admirals Club bathroom in Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina. It's great. I mean, they did all the thinking for me. So we're going to talk about this house today, about Long Island's modernist movement. After World War II, the Hamptons became a hotbed for modernism, and architects were drawn to this region's natural beauty. It was characterized by clean lines and open floor plans, and a strong connection to the outdoors. And it included architects like George Nelson, Myron Goldfinger, Norman Jaffe, Barbara and Julian Nesky, Andrew Geller, Charlie Gwathmey, Peter Blake, Harry Bates, and Eugene Futterman. Featured in Architectural Digest, this house belongs to Lauren Rottet, a designer synonymous with elegance and innovation. She crafts spaces that are as captivating in form as they are functional in use. And she is the founder and principal of Rottet Design, with offices in New York, LA, and Houston. She's a native of Texas, and she has earned accolades and admiration worldwide for award-winning environments that resonate with joyous spirit. She's also the only woman honored with fellow status by both the AIA and the IIDA. She's been Interior Design's Designer of the Year, Boutique Design's Designer of the Year, the winner of 4 gold medals at the Best of Neocon, and the recipient of a Chicago Athenaeum Award, among many other recognitions. She's been featured in Forbes, Luxury Travel, Elle Decor, Texas Architect, Condé Nast Traveler, even The Hollywood Reporter. She is also the author of Authentic Design, Lauren Rottet in the Rottet Studio. Welcome, Lauren. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So before we get started, I understand that you were in med school before you got into design, right?
Well, I started out in pre-med at University of Texas, and I loved to paint. I loved art, so I was half art major, half medical. But I kept painting buildings and everything inside buildings and painting buildings. And finally someone said, "Why don't you just switch to architecture? That's all you care about." I'm like, "You're so right." So my father was a doctor from a long line of doctors, and my brother and sister had not carried that on. I thought I needed to. I would have been a horrible doctor. Ask anyone.
Well, I was wondering, I have this rash right here. If you could take a look at it. How's that?
I have no idea. Ask me about your nose and throat. That was my specialty.
So have you ever gotten to design a medical facility?
No, it's an interesting question. And my daughter just had knee surgery, so I spent 2 days, in that waiting room. And I would like to, but it just somehow, I think I've designed everything else, from ships to houses to high-rise residential to hotels to lots of things, but I've never done anything medical.
When you've been in a hospital waiting for somebody else, have you thought of ways you could improve them?
No, trust me, absolutely. No, I'm weird about space. Like when space is really bad, I try not to look at it because I don't want it to somehow get absorbed in my brain and I ever do anything bad like that. So I just kind of keep my head down. But no, absolutely. And, there has been, and I'm not going to just Texas or Houston because it's a huge medical center, and there is actually some pretty decent design there. But it doesn't go all the way into like the rooms and the waiting areas. It's more just the lobby that you pass through. So it's absolutely true, and there's no reason it couldn't be better. And a lot of it starts with lighting. I know there's a lighting designer in here somewhere. A lot of it just starts with that terrible lighting that you're sitting under.
Now, your passion for furniture design started with a 1991 sofa called Evano. Is that right? What's the story there?
So I was living in LA, and I had a really lovely home, and I didn't have much furniture. I'm always picky about what I put in my houses, so I finally couldn't find one, so I designed one and had it built by a local guy. And someone who used to sell for Coalesce, which is now owned by Steelcase, came over and said, "Wow, whose is that?" And I said, "Well, I designed it and had somebody build it." So anyway, he goes, "Wow, well, do you mind if I sell this?" I said, "No." And so I think they just now discontinued it after 30 some odd years. And so I have the rights to make it again. They changed ownerships, and so they changed a lot of stuff. And so, it went from there into case goods and other things where everything in this house is either my design or vintage. This is my latest, which is kind of fun. We call it the cake lamp. It's meant to be, because, grandmother doesn't send you chocolate chip cookies anymore, so this is meant to be like, you can still have that nostalgia, and we're going to make little fun things out of ceramics that you can stick in there. So you can still have your, cake lamp, just doesn't have grandmother's cookies in it anymore.
Yeah, I got a Cheesecake Factory card from my grandmother, so That's how it is these days. Well, besides design of furniture and fixtures and other things, you also have a great love for landscape design, as certainly is evidenced here at the house.
Well, thank you. Landscape is really challenging, and I do like it because, and we got into, I actually TA'd the landscape course. That's how I put myself through college, because I liked it then. So I got paid to help teach the landscape course. So anyway, every time we do an interior, we render the view outside, because I've always thought, how can you do an interior without taking into account what you're seeing outside and what happens to outside at night? And not just, that's a black window, you shut them, it's night. I've always worked with outside, so we always do the landscape in all of our interior renderings. So pretty soon people are like, well, can I just get that? And we're like, sure. So I'm not going to say I know a lot about plants, because I don't, but we team with people that do in each region. And so we do the conceptual design and work it in and out of the house, because I really do want the inside and outside to flow. And then they help us with plant material and all of that. Landscape, not to sidetrack, but it's really interesting having a home here in Montauk. And I've worked with maybe 4 different ones from East Hampton to here. That won't grow in Montauk. That'll never grow in Montauk. You can't get that to grow in Montauk. Here's what will grow in Montauk. Nope. Because landscape, it's little microenvironments. It's microclimates. So what might not grow in Montauk might grow very well underneath that bridge over there, with no wind hitting it. So I find it this very challenging, interesting. You're designing with nature, and you can't force it to do anything it doesn't want to do. So I find it a very interesting architectural challenge.
When you take on a project for the first time, how do you find inspiration? How do you get started?
Well, we ask a lot of questions, and someone who just left, we're about to do a carpet line for them, so we had very little time at lunch today, but they were asking me a lot of questions. I'm like, but what about you? What is it that you're missing? What is it that, I've seen your factory, it's stunning. You're probably the most sustainable carpet there in Denmark. And they're very highly sustainable. What is it that you guys do? What are you missing? And so just, a handful of sentences from him today, because he didn't talk a lot, is what starts the inspiration, because you can put so much product out in the world, but why? If it isn't meaningful and if it's not going to be something that's different and beautiful. And like Giulio Cappellini saw this lamp, and I'm like, I thought he'd think it was like too traditional. He said, it's so brilliant, it's so beautiful. Why no one's ever done that? So I don't know, it's just fun to put stuff out there but I usually put it out, sometimes it's just for me, which that lamp was. Nobody said anything about that, I just wanted it. But usually it's, why do you need this? Why are you asking me to do this? Not just, okay, let's just do another carpet line, because goodness knows there's thousands of them. So it has to be meaningful.
Now, from the time that you meet a client for the first time until the time you have the party for the finished project, how long is it typically?
It's never shorter than 18 months. Never. And that would be an office. We do offices too, and they're the quickest. You sign a lease, you got to get in there, they go fast. A residence can take a long time. Hotels can take 6 years.
Really?
Yeah, because you have to acquire the land, you have to get through all the this and that, then you have to get through all the regional approvals, then you have to get through all the budgeting and the financing, and by then some companies sold, so then you have to find a new someone to do it. They can take 6 years, yeah. And so a lot of my clients say this is going to be a 3-4 year project. And super tall, we did Central Park Tower. A super tall is just going to take you a long time to build it. So you have to kind of prejudge what's going to be fresh in 4 years, right?
Right.
When it opens.
So at what point in the design of a building did they bring you in? Is it at the architecture stage?
Yeah, typically very, very early on, and we like that because if they we're really good, since I'm an architect, we're good at helping them save money. Sometimes they spend money on stuff no one's ever going to care about. No, structure, that's important, but some weird architectural thing that I don't mess with the architect, but sometimes we get together and we say, the budget's only this. And at the end of the day, your things are going to get cut. My things are going to get cut. Let's think this out. And like we worked with Herzog de Meuron, they were super open to it. They'd never done a hotel. So they were very interested in what the guest would actually see. Loved working with them. They did that beautiful museum. What's our beautiful museum? Yes, the Parish Museum. So just really love working with a good architect like that. And typically a good architect like that, their ego isn't offended if I say something, because mine's usually coming from, well, this is what the guests will need to see, or, as a residential, this is what the experience needs to be, and they actually like that. And then their architecture, I don't tell them what to do. They go off and do it with that knowledge.
Are there things that residential clients tend to want to have, you have to advise them that they don't really need?
Yeah. Oftentimes. And, it's usually about budget. So that's what you ask. When do they bring you in? Sometimes, again, you can just waste so much money on something silly that is just going to be silly. It was a fad. It was a trend. Why on earth do they want that? Because then they're going to run out of money and they're going to want all these other things. So it's great to get in on early. And we're always, if someone's heart's really set on it, no, sure, let them have it, But we do have that dialogue a lot. And then usually it's once we know them a little bit better. And usually it goes kind of like this, oh, you don't really like that. You don't think I should do that, do you? I'm like, well, And they're like, okay, well, we won't do it.
Yeah.
That's usually how it goes.
Well, speaking of hotels, you pioneered the idea of community spaces within hotels. For example, the Surrey Hotel in New York City's Upper East Side, which was ranked as number 1 for many, many years. What are some of the features in that hotel that you were involved in? Well,
sadly, COVID got it. They lost their land lease, so now it looks like a normal fancy Upper East Side hotel with none of that amazing art that was in it. Tons of amazing art we put in that hotel. Yeah, so I was hired late in the game on that one. They had another designer and they just weren't happy with it, and they saw something I'd done office in Paris. And they're like, well, that's what we want. We don't want predictable, traditional on the Upper East Side. We want something very different. So I had never done traditional, ever. I'd never worked with a crown molding, except maybe in school if they make you draw one. So I made my team print everything out full scale and in sections so I could figure out what a chair rail really did if you looked at that section, and how it really felt. And it was that was my first hotel, and I'd wanted to do one for like my whole career. So they got every idea that had been stored up there for 20 years, but then I had to edit myself. So I did it thinking it was Coco Chanel's pied à terre. And
that's an inspiration.
Well, it was, but again, my first hotel, it had to be good. And they didn't have a bar. And my first story about Coco was she comes in, she throws her mink over the chair, and she goes, take this, I'm going for a martini. But we didn't have a bar. I literally went into the next meeting, had redesigned the whole layout, and I said, we have to have a bar. Because Coco needs a bar. But it turned out to be great because Daniel Boulud's restaurant was on one side, and what I had actually witnessed is the people waited in the lobby. They got mad if their table wasn't ready. They didn't have a drink in their hand. Like, if we don't have a bar, this lobby is never going to work. You're going to have a bunch of mad people.
Yeah.
So we did a teeny little bar that became like the hangout, as you know, for everyone. I saw so many famous people, and they were super fun. But no, it's all gone.
I am so sorry.
It's the thing about interiors. They're not yours.
Well, let's switch to this house, which is a replica of a George Nelson house that was nearby. Tell us that story.
Yeah, so, speaking of never been to the Hamptons, I had never been to the Hamptons. I was looking for a house in L.A. Houston's very hot in the summer. You think this is hot? It's way worse than this. It's
really bad. I've been to Houston in summer.
It's bad. So I thought I would buy in L.A. I looked for 10 years, my poor realtor. And then I went to visit a friend here. I'd never been to the Hamptons, and I started looking at real estate magazines. A house designed by George Nelson and Gordon Chadwick. Well, I've got to go see that. So I called the realtor. She showed me a few other things, brought me out here. I'm like, I'm in love. And it was a mess. It was a mess. It was a bit of a mess. They had cats. There were some screens with holes in them and things. And she goes, the house is too weird. No, that's just too weird. And I'm like, yeah, I'll take it. Talk them down a little bit and I'll take it. And she goes, but you haven't looked at anything. I'm like, I know. She goes, you've never been to the Hamptons. I'm like, I know. So yeah, I bought it very spur of the moment.
Love at first sight.
It was, for sure. I had my good friend Kyle, my son knows her, and Jerry Finn, she's with me, and she goes, you're going to buy this, aren't you? I'm like, no. She goes, you're going to buy this. I'm like, okay, maybe I am.
And what year was this?
It was 12 years ago.
12 years ago. And then on the second or third visit, the reality sets in
No,
a bit?
I was always happy. Well, there's always the money thing, but short of that, no, I was happy. But I had an office in New York. I'd take the jitney out in the freezing cold winter, figure out how to get from the jitney stop and a non-existent taxi in the winter. I didn't know nobody did taxis in the winter. So the whole thing I just thought was a really fun experience.
What did you have to work on the house first to fix it up?
Well, I think I bought it in the middle of the winter, fine in the winter, but it was a particularly hot July and no air conditioning. So that was actually the hardest thing. And I had, oh my gosh, probably 4 or 5 people, no basement, no attic. Yeah, we'll lower this ceiling down to 8 feet and we'll bring a duct in. I'm like, no. I finally got one guy who's like, yeah, I studied architecture. We can do this. He said, it's not going to be perfect, as you guys can all feel. It's not perfect, but it will be pretty darn good. So we just used chassis and little corners of things and all sorts of little tricks and got it in. That was the hardest thing. And then the front bedroom that actually has a view of the lake was where the oil tank was. And so it had slop sinks and oil tanks and things like that. And we buried the tank and turned that into a bedroom and bathroom, and then put the pool in, and then tons of landscaping. It was really overgrown, and the driveway was a mess. So but natural landscaping, like I was telling someone, we only drip line the beds. We don't sprinkle, so we don't use all the well water to water the yard. So if the grass is brown, the grass is brown,
Were there any particular things you did to honor the original design while updating it?
Well, yeah, like the restoration of all of this. So this was in pretty bad shape. Some of mostly downstairs, it was in worse shape. The artists who lived here, Rob Pruitt and Jonathan Horowitz, had already started restoring this. But, when I moved in, I thought that plastic laminate in that kitchen cabinet, I don't think so. Or, that mirror in the master bathroom, if you've seen it, or primary bathroom, it's so messed up. Then I thought, nobody antiques a mirror as well as a true antique mirror. I'm just going to leave it all messed up. And same with the kitchen laminate. I sort of just got used to all of the colors. I didn't think that kitchen would function with that weird shape. And then we did a Thanksgiving in here with like 8 people in the kitchen. It was amazing. It functioned like... we as humans just do rectangles because they're easy, right?
Yeah.
But they're not that efficient, truthfully, so.
Particularly for anything that is kinetic and moves.
Which is, if you know my architecture, it's mostly about visual and or a lot of reflection, a lot of light movement, designing with light, things that aren't static.
Well, here in the Hamptons, where the billionaires continue to displace the millionaires, we've lost quite a few houses. And in fact, there was a George Nelson design house, the Spaeth House, that we lost last year. How can we persuade people to restore houses instead of destroying them?
Yeah, and I didn't know that until you told me about that. That's really sad. Mm-hmm. And then you told me about another house, not here, but somewhere else, like a major important house. And
Marcel Breuer House, destroyed 2 years ago in Lawrence, New York.
They put a tennis court up instead of the house. I mean, whew. Anyway, I think...
Then there's Chris Pratt, but he's another story.
I think that, I feel like, well, you guys don't live in Houston, which tears everything down. It's like the worst. But I think New York has gotten a little worse than it used to be. I have a home in the apartment in the design district. That's where my office is. And it used to be that you could pretty much trust that those buildings were going to be there for the rest of their lives. And now you come back 3 months later and they're gone. And there's something ugly, in its place. And it's really concerning me. I think it's a problem in general because, we, especially this recent society, it's a throwaway society. They want new, shiny, best, and they don't really appreciate grandmother's cake lamp because, that's grandmother's cake lamp. So there's no appreciation or not as much appreciation of the past, so they just want to tear it down. But the thing is that, and I happen to live in a very historic district in Houston, and it's happening. And I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to figure something out because it's going to look like, we call it Sugar Land, which is a bad suburb. So we're like, if you guys keep this up, River Oaks, which you're all buying into, is going to look like Sugar Land. You might as well just move to Sugar Land and get a big mansion. So it is serious, and I think it's a mindset. And what I think I'm going to do, and this is thanks to Hugh Newell Jacobson, if any of them know it, he takes like the homes out here and he leaves them in their absolute pure state, whether they're modernist or whether they're 1800, and then he does beautiful connections around it with homes that are very sensitive to it. So when you don't change it, you leave it, but you make it so special because you flow seamlessly through these others. So I think it's an appreciation like that. You can have both. You don't have to. You probably you're talking about billionaires, they probably have a big lot. They can probably keep that beautiful thing. Maybe it's a guest house, but they don't have to get rid of it just because they want a 20,000-foot house. Leave that and do things around it. And I think it's just a mindset that really history is not of value to you. We have to change it somehow.
People don't often look at their options that are available to them. They just plunge ahead with their plan.
I know. And then when people try to legislate, design rules, like remember when San Francisco had all those design rules? I was kind of in and out of it at the time. Oh my gosh, some of the worst buildings were made. Because when you followed all the design rules, it kind of turned into an ugly building.
Well, what are some of the most common challenges when working on restorations?
I think knowing what to save and what not to save. We happen to do the New York Stock Exchange. Few of you will ever see the work that we did in it because we certainly didn't do anything on the outside of it. But we were called in very late on that one. Thank goodness the owner of the New York Stock Exchange realized he had a good architect, but that architect had no appreciation of history whatsoever at all. And they were using the excuse, well, you can't find these lights. Well, you can't match that trim. You can't find this or that. And he just got nervous. He had heard that I'd done the survey. So he knew that I could get a building through historic and that I cared about it. And so the guy who kind of pretended to be the janitor, and he did start that way, who's the right-hand person of this owner now, kind of pulled me aside and he said, I have all of that. I have all of that in a warehouse over in Jersey. I can get the parts. You don't have to get rid of any. We can, whatever you want to keep, we can keep. And so it's still, we put in about $2 million worth of high-tech, amazing technology, but the history's there. And we freshened it, and it doesn't seem like, it needed a refresh, but everything that was really historic is still there.
Now, in terms of demographics, how can the baby boomers now inform younger generations of the importance of saving these buildings? Because a lot of these buildings, they're being destroyed by people in their 30s.
I know. It's really sad because a lot of our clients are like my kids' age and they don't appreciate it, but some of the older clients don't either. I think that, I will have to say I'm struggling with it myself, to be quite honest, in a property I own in Houston. It will literally cost me twice as much to preserve this building than to take it out, start all over, and build it in its kind. If I preserve it, it has 8-foot ceilings. If I redo it, I don't know what to do in my own state, to be honest. So it's a dilemma. But, I could possibly do what I said you could do. I could leave that, but it will cost too much. I can't even let anyone walk in it right now. It'll cost me that much just to get it to a state where I can let someone...
People go through.
But it's historically important. Well, in Houston, no one cares, but we care.
Houston does have an interesting zoning policy.
Talk about zoning, right, exactly.
You go through, there's car wash, church, strip club, pretty much, and repeating.
House,
yeah,
right?
And a private residence, all right there together.
And a high-rise, you're right.
And what is it about Houston where the highways have their own highways to the side of it?
I don't know.
What is that called?
It's a crazy place. I was just talking with someone about, we may just all move out here, Houston's getting all crazy. Those are what do they call them, the interreps? What do they call those things? But you're right. They can be like 4-lane side streets to a 5-lane freeway.
And you get on the wrong one and you are screwed, because I remember from doing that several times. Now, looking back on your career, still going, of course, but on the many projects that you have done, how do you see your influence on the interior design industry? Because you've certainly been a huge presence.
Well, that's a good question. I can see it in Los Angeles because I can definitely see when someone copies some of our stuff, which is fine. I don't really care. You just kind of, like furniture. We're pretty revolutionary in some of the office furniture that was done, and now you see it all the time. But the influence in LA was striking because when I went out there, they were doing good architecture, but the interiors was, I'd worked in Chicago, I'd worked a little bit in New York, and Dallas and Houston have good interiors. And for some reason, there's a lot of reasons, I won't get into that, but interiors in Houston, especially for offices, was always top notch. So I go to LA and I'm like, oh my God, this is horrible. So pretty quickly we got work, and then someone would see that, and it really did There was someone who gave me my first job, Stuart Laff. Kyle knows him well. He's almost 90. I think he's 88. He still works with me because he believed in my work, and he gave me First Interstate Bank, and then he gave me another one. Then he told all of his friends, well, if you want a good design, you need to hire her. And so, and then he still works with us.
That's great. Yeah. How long is that relationship?
It's, from about 87. So, he left head of real estate for the bank. I think the bank was bought or something. Then he retired. Then he was like, I'm just really bored and I'd love some medical insurance. I'm like, come on my board. And everyone in LA loves him. So it's like, wow, you hired Stuart. You're great. I'm like, I hired Stuart because he's amazing. I didn't hire Stuart for any other reason.
Lauren, thank you so much for sharing your house with us. Let's give her a big hand.
That was George, live from the Hamptons with Lauren Rottet. Now, let's meet LA's Phat Cat Swinger, and that's Phat, the 11-piece little big band bringing a fresh spin to American pop and swing. This powerhouse group fuses rock, jazz, and swing with a modern twist that makes their live shows unforgettable. You may have heard them at one of their many Disney Park gigs, meshing the smooth vibe of Sinatra with the high energy of Big Bad Voodoo Daddy. Here's our conversation with band members Marco Palos and Blake Lewis of Phat Cat Swinger.
Blake, you're really the elder statesman of American Idol now. How is it looking back on all that? Because that was, 2007, roughly?
Yeah, just a little over 17 years ago. It was a trip. It was the most amazing, surreal fever dream I could ever have imagined.
And who were the judges then when you were on?
It was the OGs. It was Paula, Simon, and Randy.
Oh, okay.
And I just had a gig in LA and Paula came to it. It was super fun.
Oh, nice. And Marco, you've been performing all over, but you've had a regular gig at Disney for a while, right? How long has that been going on?
So as a cast member, I've been there since 2012.
Okay.
And in about 2014, Phat Cat worked its way into the downtown Disney area. And in 2017, we finally started performing some of their festivals. And so we've had seasonal gigs, I would say, with them through the seasons, either the spring where they have their food and wine festival or during the holidays for the Festival of Holidays, which was ultimately what helped us design an entire Christmas show that we have.
That must be really something to perform with people at Disney World or Disneyland because everybody's so happy to be there in the first place.
Yeah, for me, honestly, it was marking something off the wish list of things to do in life because I always felt like Disney held a standard to what entertainment should be like in the sense of entertainment. And I've always figured our band to be a fine combination of musicianship and entertainment so that we can entertain the people. And so when we were accepted into the gig to start doing these festivals, and then we've been getting, really good billing with them in placement, it was just what a band can dream for when you get to play for people who are just excited to be there. You don't have to focus on trying to sell tickets and you can just do your show and focus on the art.
Now, Blake, you are a mid-century modern homeowner. So tell us about your house.
My house was built in 1962. It's really, I would guess the word would be feng shui. It's kind of U-shaped.
Okay.
And it's a modern open floor plan. And
excellent.
I have like a lattice wall that the original owner made with a sunken floor and various tiling throughout the house and almost kind of like a farmhouse kitchen.
Okay.
Very built-ins everywhere. It's super.
But do you have a fireplace like a UFO?
I do not, unfortunately. Vegas does not need fireplaces.
Good point.
Marco, growing up, you liked fireplaces that looked like a UFO.
Oh my gosh, I love them. I remember one time I was looking for houses with my mom and saw this corner house. And I thought, oh my gosh, this corner house, it's got this upstairs little, like, I guess what would have been the bar lounge party area. And the living room is huge and open. And I walk in and there's this beautiful red fireplace hanging from the ceiling and that long pipe. And I was like, Mom, look at this fireplace. And she goes, that's so ugly. And I'm like, no, Mom, no, this is cool. And she's like, no, we can't. No, this is too old. I want something new. And I'm like, no, this is so beautiful.
Marco, tell us about this first song, Martini Mama.
Yeah. Speaking of mothers.
Yeah. Our, once musical director, Sean O'Kelly, he had been, inspired writing music. And he put together this song because, he loves mixing cocktails, and he's very much, into the recipes and the exact science of finding the perfect martini. And I think he just kind of wrote it about him and his wife. And then, being able to invite friends over and whip up some martinis and have a good time in the era of before the kids came along, when, there was a lot more party atmosphere. Sean wrote it. And the funny thing is, actually, this was Sean's first time singing as well. He's usually playing the tenor sax and doing background vocals and such. And so in this particular song, we gave him the lead. I jumped on tenor sax, or actually alto. And then we brought someone else, one of our other friends, on tenor sax.
Here's Phat Cat Swinger with Martini Mama.
Walked in the room to my delight. Baby must have been feeling so right, 'cause in her hand was a shaker filled with a party that would last all night. The glasses clink, she gives a wink. I take a big sip of this perfect drink. Kick off my shoes, got nothing to lose. Grab a chair and just let me sing. She's my martini mama. Shake it, baby, all night long. She's my martini mama. Girl never gets it wrong. Martini mama, party till the break of dawn. She's my martini mama. She really turns me on. She's halfway done with the second one, smiling and looking for a little fun. She starts to dance, gives me a glance. She says, baby, put some records on. We jumped and jived, we felt alive. Called our friends to come on by. With drinks in hand, without a plan, we're all gonna have a good time. She's my martini mama. Shake it, baby, all night long. She's my martini mama. Girl never gets it wrong. Mama, party till the break of dawn. She's my martini mama. She really turns me break of please.
Well done.
That's a very dirty martini.
These guys are so cool. You got to understand that, we're on a Zoom call. And of course, you can only hear the audio. But they showed up in hats.
I know.
So that tells us a little something.
A little pork pie hat. And I don't know. Marco, what do you got on there? Is that a...
I don't know. This is a Bailey of Hollywood hat.
Okay.
And, called a Billy. And I buy things that I like. I see it off the rack. I'm like, hey, I like that.
That's a good approach to life. Buy things you like.
Now, I understand that we have some mutual friends. We are all fans of Josh Egle's Shag.
Oh, yeah.
And Danny Heller in Palm Springs.
Yes. Hello, Josh, and hello, Danny. Shout out to you guys. I very much love their art. I've been a fan. It's my dream to one day own a shag painting, like an actual shag painting someday. Right now, I just kind of, I've got a T-shirt of she's the redhead sitting on the chair with the cat and the guitar.
Okay.
And that's the painting I would love to have in my music room someday. But yeah, and then Danny makes some fantastic paintings. I can't believe they're so realistic. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's incredible. Incredible, their work. Yeah. They've been great guests on the show and supporters over the years, and maybe we can have you guys come to one of our parties. That would be fantastic. Yeah. We do those all the time.
Let's do it.
Now, Marco, something happened to you when you were 6. I think it involved, was it a Yamaha YS32? Am I getting that right?
Oh, close. Okay, so I believe it was 6th grade. That's where the number 6 comes from.
Okay.
And I got a Yamaha saxophone. Yep, that was kind of what started everything for me. And it was because in the 5th grade, I went to join band class, and I immediately walked in the room and, had a kid crush on the girl who was playing saxophone. And, so in order to sit next to her, I had to play saxophone. So I come home from school and I say, Mom, Dad, I want a saxophone. And they're like, oh, well, we got to save up for it. And it took them a year to save up for it. And that turned into a 3-year journey of me trying to get better at sax so that I could be, because she was always a year ahead of me. And then finally, it wasn't until my freshman year of high school that I got to sit next to her, and we ended up becoming really good friends. To this day, we remain very good friends.
I thought you were going to say something, and now I'm married to her.
Maybe.
Yeah, see, I chose to marry the life of music versus anybody. So this is the life I've chosen. So to this day, we remain friends.
Where were you growing up?
So that was in the high desert in Hesperia, kind of halfway between LA and Vegas.
Okay.
On the 15, and that's kind of where when my parents split up, we landed in the high desert, and that was kind of where we grew up, mostly in the desert. That's also where Phat Cat Swinger began in 2002.
Now, Blake, tell us about this next song, "Dance, Dance, Dance."
Dance, Dance, Dance is, I would say, a quintessential Phat Cat Swinger song. It's usually the opener, and, just trying to get people onto that dance floor right away. So it's just kind of a as the kids would say, a banger.
So it's upbeat.
Yeah.
It's upbeat. Yeah.
All right.
Here we go.
All dressed up to the nines. This joint is always hopping and swinging in perfect time. Everybody's got to leave your troubles at the door. Come on and party with your friends, maybe some you never met before. Here we go. Try out all your new moves, dress them up and keep them tight. Come on down and party and swing your baby tonight. There's no right or wrong way. Come on and dance and have your fun. Just dress up in your finest threads and dance till the morning comes. Bring your favorite partner or come find somebody new. And if you can't find someone, baby, I'll come dance with you. Just smoley, ole, and then laugh the whole night through. And if you can't dance, baby, then I'll show you a thing or two. I'll come dance with you. Just smoley, ole, ole, and then laugh the whole night through. And if you can't dance, baby, then I'll show you a thing or two. Come over to the dance floor and then really shake 'em down. Come jump with Fat Cat Swinger, we're the best little show in town. You know you found the right room when you hear the crooner croon. Come on, baby, don't be shy, even bloomers have to bloom. Hip, hip.
Who's the vocalist there?
I'm glad you asked. I wanted to, since this is kind of an architectural show, I wanted to share how this song is actually kind of architecturally essential to Fat Cat Swinger, actually, because the song was written, I had the music first, I had no lyrics. And then the original singer, the very first singer we had from 2002 to about 8 or so, maybe or 10, his name is Tim Porter. He wrote the first lyrics. And then our second vocalist came in when we finally had enough money to record the album. And that's who you hear on the album. And that was Douglas Rogiers, still a very good friend of ours. And occasionally he comes in and comes back and sings as well. And he's even on our Christmas album for Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. Douglas, he's this fantastic crooner who you guys might even consider bringing on your show, because this guy is, he's, I feel like, you meet people who put on an act, and then there's people who are actually the thing, the real thing. And Douglas is one of those people who is the real thing. Like you see, from the moment we ever met him, that's him 100% of the way. And he brought that magic to that album. And that album that is one of my favorite albums, because for us, it was very much the most original album. Also, with my love for mid-century art, since I felt I couldn't afford Shag, I said, hey, I called a friend of mine and I said, do you think you can make something, a themed album for us that would be in the spirit of Shag, but also spirit of Hanna-Barbera? And that's where the whole theme, if you look at the artwork of this album, all of the band members were turned into cavemen.
So Flintstones, right?
yes, very, very Flintstones. But without being Flintstones, it still has this Hanna-Barbera-esque feel to it.
Yeah.
And all of us were cavemen, and that's why the album is called Swing and Evolution. When I chose the album, the title, I said I did that because I knew that this band would always be evolving through the years. Someday, to where my hope and dream is that it evolves even beyond me. And there are enough musicians out there that would like to carry on the vision of what's been created. But Dance, Dance, Dance has been one of those songs that somehow is stuck around. It's not a radio hit, but it's a show hit. People love it at the shows.
Oh, yeah.
People sing along to it. We've added like choreography and visuals to it. So it's this big, powerful opener at every show. And whether people know it or not, it's a welcome into the show. And so it's just remained one of those things that has gone through every incarnation of Fat Cat Swinger, every evolution of Fat Cat Swinger.
Well, maybe on your next album, you can be the Jetsons, another famous series. Right?
That's a great, I love that.
Excellent. His boy Elroy.
Elroy.
His dog Astro. Right?
Yeah.
Gentlemen, this has been a blast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by June Goldfinger and Jeff Taylor, sponsors of Circle, Square, Triangle, a traveling exhibition on the architecture of Myron Goldfinger, and by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs. Okay, Tom, wrap us up.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 23,000 significant modernist houses, and access 4.3 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl, with guest research by Bobby Morris. Courteous is her middle name, or it could be Paula. We're not really sure. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive Incorporated, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. George and I'll be back soon with another swinging edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now you can dance.